Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to talk about autism and what you can do to prevent a future loved one from developing autism, what chemical exposures, what situations you can try and help them to avoid in a child so as not to develop a case of autism. And then the next video will be about treating a loved one if they have autism. So the first slide here is preventing autism. Vaccines. So there are a number of studies done with vaccines, and every study except one, there was one study which had a 1 to 1.1 increase. So that would be a 1.1x increase. But there was one study with a 1.1x increase, but all the other studies I looked at had a larger increase than that, and this was comparing vaccinated children with unvaccinated children. One study had 1.7x. One study had 4.2x. One had 4.7x, one had 7.6x, though I've lost access to that study that had 7.6x. So unfortunately, some of these studies go against the medical grain, and the people who do them get thrown under the rug by the medical establishment, and they often end up losing their medical license. So there is a lot of industrial and reputational push to suppress knowledge that autism causes or vaccines cause autism. But if you ask mothers, so about 60%, over half of mothers of autistic kids actually blame the vaccines, and the studies bear that out. And if you doubt me, which there are a lot of doubters out there, but we'll go through some of the studies at the end of this presentation. So I'll pull them up in the tabs in the browser. But let's go on to some of these other things that cause autism, because it's definitely not just vaccines. There's a lot of other things that can cause autism and lead to autism in children. So parents who have high chemical intolerance often have children who are 5.7x increased risk for autism. So so that's a huge increase to autism risk, and there's so much chemical exposure out there. So if you're in the highest 10% of chemical intolerance score as a parent or as both parents, then you have this highest increased risk of autism of 5.7x, though other deciles have also increased risk if you are intolerant to chemical exposures. Tylenol, so there's a number of studies now with the company quoting the evidence was heavy that Tylenol causes autism. And just because Trump might say something doesn't mean you have to say whatever Trump says is wrong, because there is a lot of studies on this. I'm sure RFK Jr. has read the studies, because he likes to get hands-on with things. But I have read some of the studies, and there's a 3.6x increased risk if you are in the highest tertile. So out of 3 tertiles, the lowest tertile versus the highest tertile is a 3.6x increased risk of autism. If you looked at quintiles or deciles, the exposure risk would probably be even greater. But in terms of comparing the lowest third to the highest third, it's a 3.6x increased risk. BPA from plastics has up to a 3.5x increased risk in boys who have low aromatase enzyme activity. So that's an enzyme that the body has. So BPA from plastics can also cause autism. Smoking in the home. If someone smokes in the home up to the age of 5, that's a 3.47x increased risk. Smoking during pregnancy alone, if you just smoke during pregnancy, that's a 2.9x increased risk. Difficult life event up to age 5, 2.56x increased risk. So a difficult life event can be a divorce, can be the death of a parent, can be some other very traumatic event. And antibiotic use 6 or more times is a 2.28x increased risk. Now there's some things that mitigate your risk. So all of these things, the vaccines, the Tylenol, the plastic, the smoking, the difficult life event, the antibiotic use, all increase your risk of getting autism. These things down below here, the last 3 points, prevent you from getting autism. So if you breastfeed your baby, you have 2x risk reduction. So your risk of autism goes in half if you breastfeed your kid. Vaginal seeding. So in cesarean section babies, that they don't go through the vaginal canal, they don't get all these good bacteria kind of in transit smeared on them. So you can actually take a cloth and wipe them with vaginal liquid, and that can decrease the risk of the kid getting autism by 1.32x to 3.9x risk reduction. The 1.32x was a meta-analysis. The 3.9x was an individual study that showed that it was quite effective in cesarean section babies to do vaginal seeding and to get that good bacteria on the baby. Another bacteria that seems to help is L. rhamnosus GG. So if you supplement this bacteria, and there'll be a link in the description for how you can do that, it led to actually 100% risk reduction in the one study. And there wasn't a ton of people in the study, but there was enough to kind of get a substantial result. I think there were 5 controls who got autism, or 5 or 7 controls who got autism, and 0 people who were supplement with L. rhamnosus GG got autism. So it is a significant result, and it might be worth looking into, especially if maybe you're a parent with a high chemical intolerance score, and you maybe want to vaccinate your child, or you gave them Tylenol, or you use Tylenol as in pregnancy. Or maybe you smoke too. All these things could add up to a heightened risk of having a child with autism. So supplementing L. rhamnosus GG as either a young infant or in pregnancy during the last trimester, towards the end of the pregnancy, these things substantially or eliminate your risk for getting autism, especially worth doing potentially if you were at extremely high risk of autism. So now I'm gonna go to these tabs. Now here you can see vaccinated versus unvaccinated. At the top here, you can see allergies were about 20x more common. Allergic rhinitis was 20x more common in in the vaccinated group as in the unvaccinated group. Allergies in general were about 4x more common in the vaccinated group. ADHD was 4.7x more common. Autism was also 4.7x more common. So ASD is autism spectrum disorder. You can see 19 people in the vaccinated group got autism versus 3 in the unvaccinated group. So it was 4.7% of the vaccinated group and 1% of the unvaccinated group got autism in this study of 600 people. So it's a fairly substantial study. Next study. This is vaccinated again versus unvaccinated. You can see asthma is about 5.6x more common. Ear infections are more common. Gastrointestinal disorders are more common. Developmental delay is about 2x more common. The odds ratio on the side here. But so this study didn't actually measure autism, but this next study looked at chronic health conditions, and this one didn't find much of a link with autism, though there was more people who got a vaccine ended up getting autism. But if you look at chronic health conditions in general, so chronic health conditions, the odds ratio was 2.48x. So for all of these chronic health conditions listed, the vaccinated group had 2.4x, 2.48x more cases of chronic health conditions than the unvaccinated group. And this study was actually not published. So the authors thought it was too controversial to publish. They had thousands of people in this study, and they just sat on the study because they didn't want to publish something that went against the mainstream narrative. So there is a lot of pressure on researchers not to say that the Earth is round, if you will. But yet some researchers do. So it's a testament to their gutspa, and none of them have been sent to prison as of yet. So that's good. But some of them have lost their medical licenses and so forth. So it is a serious thing sometimes to go against mainstream consensus on some of these issues. But we'll look at this next study. This just said a 1% increase in vaccination was associated with another 680 children having autism spectrum disorder or language impairment. So it was actually a 1% increase led to a 1.7% increase to autism spectrum diagnosis if you look at the study itself. This I thought was interesting. So this is prevalence of infectious disease in the disease that was vaccinated for. So you can see the unvaccinated group was more likely to get, in the light gray bars, was more likely to get one of the vaccinated diseases that the vaccinated group barely got any of. But if you look at the number of infections in the preceding 12 months, it actually shows that the unvaccinated group actually got less infections in total. So I just thought this was an interesting finding that that vaccines do prevent the vaccinated disease, but they end up getting other infections from other diseases at a higher rate in total. So they end up with more infections in total, but it totally may be worth vaccinating against severe diseases. I'm not sure if chickenpox counts as a severe disease or hepatitis B counts, or some of these other things count as a severe disease, because I think we've gone too far in over vaccinating people. And I think it would be good to space out the vaccines and not kind of use a sledgehammer to the immune system with some of these triple vaccines or quadruple vaccines in a row. So I do think there's something to be said for spacing out the vaccines, but also think we do use too many of them. So less vaccines would be good. And there's studies showing that, I can pull that up actually. One sec here. Here's my autism blog post. This just shows infant mortality based on how many vaccines have been given. And you can see that the more vaccines are given, the higher the infant mortality rate is. So a lot of the vaccines that aren't given in some of these countries are not the most needed vaccines. So I think in the States, they're particularly over-vaccinated, whereas in other countries, they give less vaccines and you get a better result if you just prevent the most severe illnesses and you let children naturally develop chickenpox and other diseases that actually build a stronger and better functioning immune system. Also, live vaccines are healthier than dead vaccines. So if it's a live vaccine that has been irradiated to make it weaker, it's actually better for your system to fight a weakened opponent than to fight an opponent that is kind of a dead opponent that has been ginned up to be scary, using some of these adjuncts that make the immune system react more strongly to the dead vaccine and some of the receptors on that vaccine. So I just thought that was interesting. Now I will bring up the Tylenol thing, because I think some people might not believe me when I say Tylenol causes autism. But here, association of cord blood plasma biomarkers of in utero acetaminophen exposure, which is Tylenol, with risk of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and autism spectrum disorder in children. And you can scroll down, and here it has autism spectrum diagnosis, odds ratio for the first tertile versus the second tertile was 2.14x, and the third was 3.62x. So, and then for ADHD, if you're curious, the second tertile led to a 2.26x increased risk of ADHD. The third tertile led to a 2.86x increased risk of ADHD. So Tylenol does cause autism, and it does cause ADHD. So the next next topic of discussion. I hope this was somewhat interesting, though perhaps long-winded. The next topic of discussion will be treating autism. So we'll go through a series of ways you can, like diet and mostly diet, but some other things you can do to increase your odds of your child pulling out of a diagnosis of autism and living a more normal life, especially if they can't speak or they have some of the more severe autism symptoms. Stemming and nonverbal are some of the things that many autistic people deal with on the more severe end. So it is a kind of an epidemic. There is a lot of autism out there, and the vaccines, the Tylenol, the smoking, the plastic, the difficult life events, all of these things have been going up over time, except for smoking, which has gone down. But autism rates have been going up, and it would be great if we can get a handle on that. I think the world of some of these researchers who are trying very hard, and public administration figures who some come to mind, RFK Jr. being one of them, who has really gone out of his way and sacrificed a lot of his reputation in order to shed some light on how we can encourage people to practice ways of living that reduce your odds of getting autism. And hopefully the subsequent generations will see less cases of chronic illness, because vaccines, again, cause a lot of chronic illness. So it's kind of incumbent on us to take a generation that was 8% chronically ill, and now we're like 60% chronically ill as children. And we have to reduce that, hopefully, to the 8% again. And a lot of that is diet. Some of that is vaccines. Quite a bit of it, actually, maybe a third of it. And other things also go into that, too. So thank you for watching the video. I hope you found it informative. And I hope it's not... Science can be revolutionary. It's like a new paradigm opens up sometimes in science. So I think it's time. They say in physics, they say science or physics only progresses with the death of the previous inventor of the foremost theory, and then that opens room for someone else to come up with another theory once the previous theory guy passes away. But in medicine, there is also financial incentives. So I think medicine is even slower than physics in adopting new ways of thinking, which is a bit sad because a lot of lives get lost in the time frame it takes for something to go from research to adaptation. But hopefully we can do much better as a new generation of people with new ways of thinking comes on the scene. And I look forward to, or I'm excited about the potential in getting rid of some of these chronic diseases, these allergies, these autism disorders, these ADHD diagnoses, and living a life where people are healthier and happier also, because health and happiness, longevity and happiness are really two of the most important things in life. So thank you for watching. I hope you found it informative, and I wish you the best. And the next video will be about treating autism and how you can finagle with diet and some supplements and other things to get your children out of a diagnosis of autism if they have been diagnosed. So once again, thank you for watching, and have a good night.